What causes tinnitus? So I'm Joey Remini from seekingbalance.com.au, and I work with tinnitus. And I see a lot of people with these unusual sounds in their ears, in their head, in their body, slowly navigate their way toward figuring out how to turn the volume down and eventually dissolve that sound so it's no longer right at the front of our awareness, quite debilitating and distracting and at times incredibly distressing. So what causes it? Tinnitus, these sounds in the ears are sound messages that are being perceived by the auditory cortex in the brain. So anywhere between the brain pathways, the midbrain, the brainstem, and the inner ear structures, there can be sounds being generated. And sometimes if we start at the mechanical, so you've got bones and tendons and moving parts and hair cells literally in the inner ear and middle ear, and they can be creating mechanical sounds that nobody else hears, but you hear them. And that could be popping and clicking, very distracting. Could be even earwax moving around the ear canal or near the eardrum. And of course, it could be an infection that's coming and going, in which case you would expect the tinnitus sounds to come and go with the infection. So there's kind of mechanical sounds that you could be hearing that are coming from somewhere around the architecture of your ear, the outer ear, middle ear, or inner ear. So I mentioned hair cell changes, and in the inner ear, we have these little detected cilia, and we call them hair cells. And they're detecting lots of sound wave movement in the inner ear. If we are exposed to noise, so loud sounds over a prolonged period of time, some of those hair cells can permanently die, which can possibly lead to tinnitus sounds. However, hair cell loss and hearing loss does not always lead to tinnitus sounds. So you can have tinnitus sounds and absolutely perfect hearing, and you can have really severe hearing loss and no tinnitus. So they are independent, but it is another potential cause of tinnitus sounds in the ears. Hearing loss can come from many, many places, from genetic conditions to noise exposure to the natural aging process. And so, yeah, getting a hearing test, looking at your hearing, may or may not be related to your tinnitus. I think it's really important to view hearing loss as something that we look into for, we need our hearing to communicate, to be in the world. And so sometimes hearing aids can be a really useful way to address hearing loss, which may or may not impact the tinnitus at all. They're kind of separate. Medication use and drug use, for that matter, can affect the sounds that our body is making. So as sound waves come into our ears from the outer world, they travel in through the ear canal, through the middle ear where there's bones and muscles moving, airwave vibrations, it's mechanical. Then it goes into fluid in the inner ear and eventually turns into electrochemical pulses, neural impulses, action potentials that move through the neural pathways, through the brain, and that's interpreted. So in that process, as we're taking drugs of any form, medications or recreational drugs, it can change the fluidity of the body and it can change the way we perceive sounds within the body. So it can be a side effect of drug use. And head or neck injuries and jaw tension, temporomandibular joints. So if you do find yourself with head, neck injuries, migraines, headaches, clenching of the jaw, that can create a muscular tension that can certainly be relieved if you get help coming back. And that actually, you can also release a lot of that tension. And I do this work with my clients through your own breath, through your own conscious connection to your body, of releasing any towards stored tension patterns around the jaw, around the tongue and mouth, around the head, neck, and shoulders. So a lot of that, again, is reversible. But if you think about just the extra muscle use of tensing and gripping and being in fight, flight, fawn, freeze trauma patterns somatically in the skeletal-muscular body, that creates a pulsing tension that cultivates noises that the body is actually generating, and only you hear, nobody else can hear. So essentially, our biology itself is generating noise, genuine, actual noise. So you have this internal noise at all times. The thing is that you're not always aware of it, because just like the washing machine or the fridge or the trains, There are sounds in our environment that we tune out because we've identified them as not threatening and boring, neutral, unhelpful, irrelevant. And that's exactly what we want to do with any of our internal body sounds. So if you do have this like stress tension around the head and neck, or an ear infection, or hearing loss, or medication use, we actually want to get the body itself to recognize that internal sound as irrelevant, neutral, non-threatening. So we pull it out of the fight, flight, freeze, fawn trauma biochemical processes, and that shifts it out of the awareness. It moves into a place where we're no longer consciously focusing on it or aware of it or worried by it. So there's lots of inner ear conditions that can lead to tinnitus, Meniere's being one, which is a fluid buildup and a change of fluid movement within the inner ear. Many forms of migraines, tumors. There are some acoustic and vestibular schwannomas, acoustic schwannoma or vestibular schwannoma, which are growths around the vestibular cochlear nerve. And as the tumor grows, it can press into some of the sound pathways in the hearing nerve and create unusual or changing sounds. And an MRI scan is the gold standard way to look into that. And an ear, nose, and throat surgeon can help investigate for if there's any tumors around the ears that may be related to the tinnitus sounds, in which case the tinnitus is alerting us to something that we want to talk to the doctor about. So I always think about the sounds in our body as useful, valuable pieces of information that the body's drawing our awareness to. And which sounds contradictory when I say we're actually training ourselves to not be threatened by it and to view it as irrelevant. That's after we've had medical clearance and after we've realized, okay, maybe there's been a capillary burst near my ear, so maybe there's been a very minor change to some of the fluid flow around my ear, but I'm healthy and safe. I've had medical clearance, and so we honor that it's a false alarm, and then we can shift out of that threat system or trauma patterns. So last up is chronic conditions or autonomic nervous system, chronic stress. So any types of autoimmune disorders, they can also lead to tinnitus sounds because the nervous system is chronically active in a way that's extra physiological load for the body. So if we're constantly feeling rushed, if we're constantly feeling judged, if we're constantly feeling shamed, and this is where the conversation of masking comes in. If you're a neurodivergent being and you're having to push through in a 9-to-5 job, or you're having to show up and force and pretend and fake it, it can just be such a physiological load on the body that we're constantly not really feeling that we can relax into being who we really are as we really are. That is another way that we can see the tinnitus come up as the body saying, hang on a minute, this is too much for me. I really want to slow down and live at my own pace. So if we learn to read our body as a compass, we can learn to identify what's the tinnitus telling me. Have I had medical clearance from a doctor, a qualified medical doctor? If yes, and the tinnitus is still there, how can I listen to the body, glean its wisdom and heed its wisdom, and learn to stand up for my boundaries, advocate for myself, make any changes I need to my external environment so I can relax into my own rhythm and be who I am more often, to really potently break some of those chronic stress patterns that can keep the body in fight, flight, freeze, fawn. So I hope that's useful for you. Visit my website, seekingbalance.com.au, if you'd like to learn more about joining a very supportive community, my RockSteady community, and how to reverse those tinnitus pathways, bring them into the back of the conscious awareness, and be able to live your life with a lot more focus on your wholeness, your pleasure, what drives you, and being the person that you're here to be. So it's a bye for now.